Welcome to the third episode of the Wonder and Awe podcast. I'm Louie Schwartzberg, and I'm going to be your host. Many of you already know me from the films I've made that celebrate life, like Fantastic Fungi and my moving art series on Netflix, because I love taking viewers on journeys through time and scale by making the invisible visible and focusing on important planetary issues. My work has always combined the how of science and the why of art. And I've always seen wonder and awe as that intersection between art and science. That's where curiosity comes from. And this podcast fills that sweet spot. What I've learned over many years of filmmaking is that being immersed in nature increases our capacity for courage, creativity, kindness, and compassion, the components we need in order to save our world. That's why I'm proud that today's podcast is supported by the Fetzer Institute. They're helping build a spiritual foundation for a loving world. Fetzer's new study, What Does Spirituality Mean to Us, the U.S., reveals how spirituality informs our understanding of ourselves and each other and inspires us to take action for the common good. You can explore these findings and more at spiritualitystudy.org. My two guests today have spent decades defending the values and teaching us how to make a lasting change in our lives and in our world. I'd like to welcome Dr. Jeffrey Bland to the Wonder and Awe podcast. He's an internationally recognized leader in the nutritional medicine field for over 35 years and is known as the father of functional medicine. He's authored 5 books on nutritional medicine for healthcare professionals and 6 books on nutrition and health for the general readers, which includes The Disease Delusion, Conquering the Cause of Chronic Illness for a Healthier, Longer, and Happier Life. Today, I'm also really proud to welcome my dear friend, Ruth Westreich, to the podcast. Ruth is a wonderful artist, philanthropist, and activist. For many years, she's brought art into the world of healthcare and education, and she's been a strong supportive partner for our Wonder and Awe podcast since the very beginning. Her new book is called Creating Conscious Conversations of Consequence, reminding us that now is the time to open our hearts and our minds to a more holistic and inclusive way of being. I'd like to invite you to questions for our guests throughout the live podcast. Please submit your question in the comments section of this live stream, and our team will be reading all of them. And please don't forget, tell us where you're writing from so we can feel this global connection. Jeff, you're known as the father of functional medicine, and I know you've traveled more than 6 million miles around the globe, teaching the science to more than 100,000 healthcare practitioners. Can you explain this world-changing science to our listeners? And how can our listeners start applying functional medicine principles to their own lives?
Yeah, thanks, Louie. What a privilege it is to be with you and to be with Ruth today and in exploring this extraordinary intersection between art and science. So we have to ask the question, where does any kind of belief system start in the world? And I think it starts from observation. And really, art is the manifestation of making material in some form the way we observe the world. And so in my travel, these 6 million miles over the last 40 years, I've had the opportunity and real privilege of meeting people of different cultures and different languages and different belief systems who are leaders in their areas around the world. These are principally individuals in the healthcare community. And it's led me into asking the question, is there a unifying theme that kind of ties together these different ways that people view health and disease across these different cultures? And what I have come to recognize is that the connection that we share, this kind of universal thinking together of our minds, relates to the observation of how people interact with their environment, how they respond to things that influence their function in their body at such a way that they ultimately translate into downstream what we call health or disease entities. And these functional changes that we experience in our bodies, which are interrelated to how our world are influencing our function could be really categorized into 4 different areas: our physical functioning, our metabolic or physiological functioning, our cognitive functioning, and our behavioral functioning. And when I started thinking about that, I recognized this was a unifying theme that tied together things that might appear to be so disparate as traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, Native American medicine, medicine of Amazonia. All cultures seem to share these principles in different language systems and different ways that they express it in their art, in their language, in their music, in their theater, as to how they perceive the manifestation of those areas of function in their lives. And so that led me then to kind of think about how could you develop a system that unified all these various ways of healing to look at upstream, the cause of the changes of function, rather than downstream, what we call it as it relates to the diseases that result as the outcome. And that was the birthing then in 1990 of the concepts of functional medicine, looking for the upstream kind of causes that lead to the changes in function that then later then translate down into the diseases, which can differ in the way that different cultures call them, but they may all share a common origin upstream, and that was the search for truth at the level of cause rather than effect.
Wow, that's incredible. Ruth, I know you've been a big supporter of Jeff's work for years, and you've seen how getting to the root cause of illness can change a patient's life. Why is the shift in consciousness so important now? And why should we be looking for the root causes of our problems?
Well, as I have been interested in health for everybody, health for the planet and the people for many, many, many years. And I began my work in integrative medicine, functional medicine, natural medicine as a philanthropist. But I kept going upstream because as wonderful as these all are, sometimes we weren't getting to the root causes. And the root cause can be lots of times the environmental stressors that we're going through every day. So as I went upstream, I kept thinking, okay, where's the entry point? And for me, the entry point is our environment. And how we are showing up with that, and how it is either enhancing us or making us sick. So, that was kind of my foray into that. So Jeff and I have known each other for a long, long time. I'm a big supporter and big fan of his Personalized Lifestyle Medicine Institute, as well as his new company, Big Bold Health, because I think that we are all looking, especially now at this time, like what is separating some people from continuing to be healthy through this crisis, and what is making certain people succumb. Mm-hmm. And I think it is how vibrant and how resilient is your immune system. So I feel that's the kind of the starting point that we need to be there. And we don't really give enough attention to that. And sometimes we think, oh, well, you hear the term all the time, let's just reboot your immune system. But if your immune system is not strong and it's not resilient, you're rebooting something that is actually not going to make you well.
So Jeff, I mean, you talk about that, interconnection between our immune system and our bodies, and the immune system on a planetary scale. I'm just thinking, and I'm curious, maybe this pandemic is an example of the fact we've diminished the immune system on the planet. What do you think about that?
Yeah, Louie, every bit of your work that I've had the privilege of seeing, to me, is through my lens, is translated through the awe and wonder of how the components of our planet are interconnected, both living and non-living things. And as I got thinking about that, and this is where art intersects directly with science, I think, I started to recognize that in the human being, we have really 2 ways that we communicate with the outside world in 24/7, 365 real time. And those are our nervous system and our immune systems. And when I started thinking about the immune system, I thought, well, just a minute. our immune systems of our human body are attached to the immune systems, the primitive, what we call primitive immune systems associated with our microbiome that lives in our intestinal tract, because bacteria have defensive systems that are kind of immunological focused. Then I thought, well, hold it, our microbiome is connected, as is our body's immune system, to the food we eat. And then I thought about plants, and plants develop a whole series of what we call phytonutrients, certain things like carotenoids, retinoids, vitamin D, all sorts of different things that plants make, flavonoids, and fiber-related materials, all of which are part of the plant's immune system. The plant actually defends itself through the manifestation of its own immune system. And that immune system of the plants, when we eat it, influences the immune system of our body. And then I thought, well, hold it, the plants, they interrelate with the large carbon, hydrogen, hydrological, sulfur, phosphorus cycles of the planet, the large cosmos, which is the resistance factors that our planetary systems have to resist change that we call the planet's immune system. Therefore, there's this network of interconnection among the planetary immune systems, plants' immune systems, humans and all animals' immune systems that gives rise to the function that we see, which becomes the state of health of planetary system. And I think that your art, the way that you've captured the extraordinary beauty of nature, helps us to understand those interconnections on a way that's much deeper than just looking through a microscope.
Well, thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that. I think beauty is nature's secret language that motivates us to have DNA go forward, right? We fall in love. We want to make babies. It's all about evolution. And I think it's the secret language that orchestrates the dance on Earth. And Ruth, I know that with your art, I think you do the same thing as well on a very kind of global scale. I think that, your readers realize that we are a part of Mother Nature and this precious planet. Can you talk about your artwork and how your new book expresses that big idea?
Well, yes. As an artist, that is the way that I've always expressed myself. And working with Jeff through the years and all the way through all of the different health disciplines, I really came to feel that I don't think we could have personal health if we don't have planetary health. Just as Jeff was saying, I think it is also interconnected and tied together. And we know that Mother Nature is suffering. We know that. And we know that so many people on the planet are suffering as well. And so as an artist and as an activist and as a philanthropist, I was speaking with my co-author on one of my other books, Creativity Unzipped. And she said, Ruth, I've known you for so long. You're an artist, philanthropist, activist. You've never put all of these things together. You've always kept those parts of your life separate. And what would happen if you suddenly decided to put them together? And it was absolutely incredible. The next piece that I painted started this series of activist art in which I now have 20 pieces, which became a book. And what was happening is that this first piece, I call it the piece that painted itself, because I didn't feel like I was in control. And I get into the flow in painting all the time. But when I finished this piece, I stepped back and I was taken aback. It's like, oh my gosh, where did this come from? And so I just sat with it for a couple of weeks, and then I had another one, and then another one. And I figured out that this is my way of opening these, what I hope to be intergenerational conscious conversations of consequence that were inspired by my artist brush. And because I think it'll looking at these pieces, regardless of how you feel about any of the subjects, whether it's, the climate crisis, whether it is our democracy now, whether it's plastics in the ocean, you are looking with your heart space at these pieces, and they're evoking something in you that will then allow us to open up a conversation or a dialogue.
I believe that. I believe that sincerely, Ruth, because I think that, when we fall in love with something, we protect it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Babies are cute, kittens are cute, puppies are cute. There's a reason for all that. Because life wants to go forward. It's really, I think that's one of the magical things that art can do. And you don't have to teach anybody what is beautiful. You can go to school to learn that. It's kind of in our genes and our DNA, which I think we're going to get into soon. But I wanted to ask Jeff, we talked a little bit about a reboot earlier, and here we are in this COVID-19 situation. And I think it raises an alarm bell to our aging, unfit, and immune-compromised society. What do you think we need to do to change? And what changes do you think we'll see as we pass through this transformational period?
Well, thanks, Louie. I think that's one of the questions of our age right now, isn't it? And, we're being challenged. I always think that organizations and human cultures are challenged in their development to see if they're worthy moving to the next level. And we're undergoing that kind of a challenge right now with all the various things that are going on to see if the human species is worthy of moving to the next level. I think it is, but it's going to have to mobilize a lot of its capabilities to be resilient and be creative for solutions. So when I look at COVID-19 or the SARS-CoV-2 virus, I start thinking about what is that as a pressure point for change. And I actually just published an article in the journal Medium that people can get on the web, just download, which talks about my view of COVID-19. What do we do now as individuals? And if I can kind of summarize in quick response, having now read literally hundreds of papers in this field since February or January of this year, and that the literature is just replete with new studies coming out, I've come to recognize that COVID-19 was just a wake-up call for something that already existed that we were putting behind the screen because we didn't want to deal with it. And that is the fact that our society, as Ruth has already so well said, is not well. Mm-hmm. It's not physically well, it's not emotionally well, it's not spiritually well. It is suffering. And it's suffering at every level, from the planetary level down to the individual level, probably even to the microbial level. And the reason for that is that there have been so many factors that cause us to have to respond to what we consider crises, that we have lost a lot of our reserves. And we call those comorbidities in the humans. Comorbidities are things like diabetes, arthritis, heart disease, obesity, hypertension, the things that we now recognize are associated with increasing risk of serious infection with the SARS-CoV-2 virus that produced the COVID-19 disease. And the severity of the disease has been tied to how many of those comorbidities you have. Well, the comorbidities are really just a collection of disturbances in our body's function that leads us to higher response to an environmental secondary perturbant, in this case, the virus. We're already poised, because we're not well, to over-respond, and our immune system doesn't have the checks and balances it would normally have to accommodate and be resilient to an infection. We see children are much less prone to have a serious illness from exposure to the SARS virus, because the children's immune system still has some higher resiliency. It hasn't been imprinted and trained to be damaged. As we have these comorbidities, we have a damaged immune system. It's lost its resiliency. It then overreacts. You've heard about things like cytokine storms that actually is a bystander injury to our body from an immune system that lost its control and can actually kill us as a consequence of the immune system that is over-responding. So these, to me, are just symptoms of a more general problem that constitutes every year tens of millions of people to die from being unhealthy in the absence of COVID-19. And we just have been kind of shrugging our shoulders saying, well, that's just what happens when when people grow older, they get sick, but it's not just older people. We have seen younger and younger people starting to get diabetes and get non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and start to get hypertension and start to have cardiac problems and arthritis and dementia, well, actually problems as it relates to behavioral dysfunction. All of these are symptoms of an unwell, not only individual, but an individual living in unhealthy society. So I think that we have an opportunity. It's a wake-up call. We have a pandemic within a pandemic, and we need to deal with the cause and not just the effect. If we want to, we're going to have more pandemics, as Tony Fauci has told us. This is not just a one-off, this COVID-19 experience we're going through as a consequence of more population density in our cities, changing of climate, changing of food, changing in transportation, changing in social disenfranchisement of many people. We're going to see more and more of these pandemics. So what are we going to do? It's not just developing new immunizations and treatments. It's
Right.
actually dealing with the cause. And this is our opportunity to address that.
Yeah, I believe that. I think that's why it's so important to bring art, I guess, into our lives as well, because that's maybe the shift of consciousness we need in order to change behavior. Like we've had the science for 50 years, Earth Day 1970. Why haven't we changed our behavior? It reminds me, Ruth, we both met at UCSD when I launched, the visual healing program into Jacobs Medical Center. And I know you have a lot of experience helping people through art, words, and music. And I know it's been a lifelong passion for both of us. And we've seen how art can touch and move and inspire us, from hospitals to the lives of young people. So how has your life been inspired by art? And why do you think it's so important to bring it into everyone's life?
Well, I would say not just art, I would say creativity. Because everybody is creative. I mean, obviously, we get up in the morning, we create our lives every day.
Yeah.
So we are all creative. We just have been taught that there are certain people that are creative and certain people that aren't, certain people that are artistic and certain people that aren't. But I don't believe that at all. What I believe is that creativity is the basis for how we live our lives, whether we feel whole and complete or whether we feel that this sort of, lack. And I know in our book, we wrote this book, Creativity Unzipped, and we interviewed almost 1,800 people. And one of the questions that we asked, and the age range was like, 20 to 90. So it was all over the place. We asked, if you were not allowed to pursue your creativity or your artistic ability, how much do you think has affected your life? From 1 to 10. And the vast majority of these answers were like 7, 8, 9, because it was something I think that's so innate in people that if you are not allowed to experience what that could look like, sometimes I don't think that we ever get over it. And I'm thinking to myself, we were talking earlier, if you are an older person, if you are housebound, if you have these comorbid conditions right now, and you have nothing to sustain you except watching the news, people are going crazy. I mean, I have my art. I'm still painting practically every day. Some period of time, I'm still painting with friends. I'm still teaching art. And my art has sustained me my whole entire life through all of the best of my life and the worst of my life. I cannot imagine my life without it. And if I were thinking that, my children are the most important thing to me, but my art is next. And I cherish it. And I feel so lucky that I have been able to use it the way that I've been able to use it.
That's beautiful. Well, so Jeff, let me ask you, if what role do you think could art or nature have in functional medicine? I mean, do you ever see a day when nature, visual healing energy will become more of an enlightened medical practice?
Yeah, Louie, I think for both you and Ruth, you've done such a great job of kind of walking us down this wonderful journey that we're discussing about how art opens up our minds, hearts, and souls to experience, to redefine our reality, and to move away from a down and in kind of perspective where sometimes we get caught in a do loop of negativity into an up and out opportunity to create a new reality, a new sense of vision, a new sense of purpose. And I think that, as with Ruth, who has eloquently expressed, we all have art within us in different forms, different manifestations. My sister is really a graphic artist. Her daughter is a fine artist. And I didn't get that talent. I think I got a different kind of artistic talent. My artistic talent is with words and creative ideas. It is putting things together in ways that other people haven't thought about, and hopefully communicating in a way that helps them to see the world in a way that they might manifest the better of their outcome. And so I think that all of us are capable of actually bringing the artful part of our capabilities to make this world a better place. But you have to sometimes push away the things that want to bridle us, that want to define us, that want to pigeonhole us, that want to say, no, I think you should be the following, and you ought to follow my rules of the road. And in so doing, and that could be in our job, that could be in our relationships, that could be in the way we self-image our own identity, it then can kind of limit our ability to be the creatively expressive person that really is in ourselves, that when we put that together with community goodness, creates a transformation in society. It's a healing energy. And you can see that in all cultures. You know, now there's this rewilding movement that we see. What is rewilding? It's like going out in nature. It's hanging out with streams, smelling the forest, getting your hands in the dirt. And, you know, people have said, well, that sounds kind of weird. Well, it's actually scientifically been proven to have positive effects on our immunological system. When you look at different populations of white blood cells that are involved with immune function, you can actually measure the physiological effects that occur from rewilding and making the world, once again, the nature of complexity that produces the opportunity for creation. So I think these are places where the intersection of science and art are really giving us an opportunity to create a new society.
Well, it's actually been going on, I think, in indigenous societies for tens of thousands of years, right?
Yes.
I mean, they probably didn't have that separation between art and science. If they made a bowl, it was a beautiful bowl, you know, but also held water, you know, and it had that functionality attached to it. Jeff, last week, I think you told me that, you know, that maybe that our DNA has bliss in it. It just blew my mind. And then we need to unearth the goodness that can reside in our genes. Can you help explain that big idea, and how can we unlock the bliss that's inside our genome?
Yeah, thank you. So I noticed that two of our viewers, Mary and Cheryl, have asked questions about, you know, how do we take what's happening right now? It could be as far ranging as wildfires to, you know, some of the things that global climate change is causing, cause people problems, to the stress that we're under right now that are creating us to be feeling distressed. What do we do to combat that? Mm-hmm. And it's more than my belief. I think it's the facts. If you look at our genome, the inheritance that we have in the river of life that have been inherited through the creation of the human being, that this information, I call it our book of life. A lot of people feel that that's a bad news book. You know, it has information about how we're going to die. Like, are we going to get heart disease or cancer or diabetes or arthritis, or we have something in our families that we think, oh my word, look at me, I got the bad luck of the draw with my genes. So it's kind of a negative story. That's the way it's been told throughout, particularly the last 20 years since the Genome Project was deciphered. But I have a whole different spin on that. The information that really tells us how we're going to die is not present in our genome. What is present in our genome is how we can live. How we can live, the most positive outcome. And there are genes within our genome, our book of life, that encourage bliss, that encourage exaltation. They're genes that actually regulate the release of various neurochemicals and neurotransmitters and hormones, like oxytocin is a classic example, that creates empathy, that creates understanding, that creates the ability to form community and to cooperate. And there are these genes that probably have been selected for in societies to allow us to survive in group settings. So we're not just individuals out in the wild by ourselves. They create then the opportunity for collective experiences of greatness, collective experiences of joy, collective experiences of exaltation. And those genes are waiting to be turned on. The problem is that we've overused our alarm genes. Our alarm genes are to defend us against potential harm. And those genes are also there. They produce a whole series of messengers that cause us to be in flight or fright. And they cause us to be the god of war, the color red. That is the inflammatory genes. Those are genes that are turned on under states of hostility. So what we need to do is recognize that the goodness genes are waiting there to be mobilized. And that's one of the things that art does. It takes us into a different place, which we can then start re-exercising the expression of our bliss genes, our genes that associate with amore, the genes that are turned on with love, love of nature, love of one another, love of culture. And those genes then empower long and healthy lives. That's a really interesting and important message that we don't spend enough time thinking about, that our genes really encode for goodness. They don't encode for rage and for hate and for war.
That seems to be, I think, the new story, Jeff. Like, no more survival of the fittest, kill or be killed, that whole macho look. Maybe we need more of the feminine, perspective on nature. So Ruth, tell me, what do you think? How can we recover this personal bliss and goodness that Jeff is talking about, especially at a time when we're concerned about the health of our planet?
Well, I'm incredibly concerned about the health of our planet. I'm incredibly concerned about the health of our population. I'm also incredibly concerned about what people of my generation are leaving for their children and grandchildren. I can't dwell, I mean, it bothers me so much. I am consumed with it. But I think the thing for me is that, and for everybody, I have always been incredibly curious, whether it is, I'm curious about nature, I'm curious about my art, I'm curious about science. And the parallels for me, nature has always been my go-to place. Just Jeff was alluding to, I forget what you're calling it, but it's like nature bathing. People in Japan, they've actually done many, many studies on nature bathing. And I know that something happens to me when I am out in nature. I know it. I feel it. I breathe it. Something is happening to me. So that's my go-to place. But I think as far as people need to develop a curiosity of everything around them. I know we used to go to the Golden Door years ago, my husband and I. We would go on this 3-mile walk every day up the mountaintop. And people would want to walk behind me. And I would say to them, "What are you walking behind me?" And they say, "Because we want to see what you see. You see everything. You see all of the little things that are on the ground. You see things that are in the trees. We want to see what you see because you're always so curious." So I think that's a good place to start. And that's what we instill in our children is real curiosity.
Well, Louie, could I respond? Because I think Ruth has just opened a golden door, to use her there. That really is the theme of this whole discussion that the three of us are having. And this is a little test that I would put out to each of the listeners here. How do you feel? How does a person feel if they're sitting on the rim of the Grand Canyon at a sunrise? I still am fortunately still surfing, not like I used to, but still surfing. And my old dudes that I surf with at the end of a surfing day, after we've caught a few waves, they get back to the beach and we can remember the the emotional experience at every wave we caught. It wasn't just getting propelled by a wave going inshore. It was the shape of the wave, the way the sun was hitting the wave. It was it was everything. And those experiences we all have in certain places in our lives. Maybe not everybody surfs, maybe not everybody is out in nature the same way, but all of us can capture in our lives that moment where we knew that every goodness gene was turned on. Mm-hmm. We know we can access that. We know the bliss was coming. We have that feeling. And we need to find those places. That's where we should be practicing. When people talk about practicing good health, that's a good place to start, practicing good health. Find those places where you know that your genes of goodness are being turned on, and practice being there so that you can call them up anytime you want to. That's what the great Sufis and the great gurus have all been able to do, is find that place where they can produce in even the most congested of environments in the center of Bangladesh. They can create their own joy and bliss in that environment. And we can train ourselves to do that because that messaging system resides in all of our genome. And art is a way to get there.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes like I get really entranced with the rhythms and patterns of nature. And I feel like it's looking into a mirror because it's mirroring the phenomena that is occurring inside of every cell of your body, right? The cytoplasm, the water, the networking, the branching, the circulatory system, the neurological pathways are exactly a mirror of the trees I'm watching right now blowing in the wind. It's a mirror. And that's why you get this really warm feeling of like a homecoming. Like when you slip into bed after you've been traveling for a long time, it's like, big, I'm back. And
Louie, I can't even imagine how many people you have inspired with your work. I mean, it's one of my go-to places. I see the work that you've done. I see your butterflies. I see your hummingbirds. When you don't, I find nature everywhere, absolutely everywhere. If I pick up a rock and there's a worm under it, that's really interesting to me. I want to watch it. I want to check it out, see what's happening to it. And as you go along, when I look down a pathway, if I see the teeniest little bud of a flower, the teeniest little thing, and I take a picture of it and I bring it back and I blow it up, it could look like the most beautiful orchid I have ever looked at. It's like a miniature. There's nothing in nature that is by accident. And it's when you study that and then you start to look for it. When I'm out hiking, my good friend and I, we go every year. It's our 14th year. We have gone for a week to 10 days to a different region of the country, photographing, talking, and meeting people. And we published our first photography book about 5 years ago called Finding Ourselves on Sacred Ground. Oh. And I get as much joy out of the macro and the micro at the same time. So it's been one of the most significant things that's ever happened to us. And we have been places that most people will never see. And we have been lucky enough to be able to photograph things so that people that will never have that opportunity can see what we see. They can feel, hopefully, what we felt when we were there.
Yeah, that is part of my mission, Ruth, is to bring the healing energy of nature, especially to marginalized communities that will never have, the time or money to be able to go to Tahiti or Africa or, Galapagos. And also because even in my short lifespan, I've seen these places starting to diminish from, tourism, and obviously environmental degradation. I saw the islands in Fiji are starting to go underwater, the ice in Greenland getting thin. I did, soaring around the world, a major theme park ride film at Disney, which is like all the sacred places of the world. It's the most popular attraction in Shanghai, and then the second or third most popular in all the other theme parks. And when you think about the fact that people go there to watch Disney characters or Marvel or Star Wars, but nature can be the highest exhilarating experience. But also I recognize that these places are disappearing. So Jeff, let me ask you, I'm curious about a lot of the stuff that I film isn't like normal. No, I mean, it's like as Ruth was saying, it's the micro, the macro, it's slow-mo, time lapse. And what I think it does is it stretches the brain's ability to pigeonhole it, and maybe, creates more plasticity in the brain, because it's like, oh, I know what that is. It's a flower, but wait a minute, it's opening, it's closing, it's opening. And therefore, like, how do I categorize that? Is it live action? Is it animation? I'm just curious, can that be a way to accentuate what you talked about earlier, that gateway into the goodness and bliss inside our genes?
Wow, there's so much in what you just said there. That can be an expository that probably could go on for a long time. So I'll try to capture quickly just a little fragment of what you said from my perspective, because there was a lot of wisdom in that little discussion. What I've come to recognize is that we live in a hologram, to use a metaphor. In any one moment of our life, in any one moment of time, if we really do what Ruth was saying and we try to capture as much as we can in the space that we find ourselves at the moment, you will find recapitulation of so many other things that we've learned, seen, or may seen later. We're in this holographic time space. And this hologram teaches us about interconnection. It also teaches us about the kinetics of the world in which we live, that it's a rolling frame of time that really creates a kinetic and dynamic opportunity for continual learning and continual observation. It's interesting in medicine and in science, we often study things as if they're frozen in time, like a disease. We say you have a disease. Well, that sounds like it's just a capture. You're in there and you can't do anything about it. It's like time independent. But we know that all of these things that we study are really dynamic processes. Things come in, things go out, things change. And what we really need to understand is that we live in this dynamic world in which we can use that dynamic nature for our own self-improvement. So even now studies have been showing that what we consider aging, and I'm going to talk about biological aging, which can be measured in certain parameters in the human body, that those are not as fixed and immutable as we once thought. The hologram in which we're living, the experience that we're having, can influence the way that biological aging occurs, and it can be regressed. That there is now evidence that doesn't mean that when we're 80 we're going to be 20, but it means that we can actually modulate some of these things that we've appreciated as aging with the new science of understanding of what it is that creates the dynamics of life process, the biology of life. And I think that as we learn more about those concepts at a scientific level, we understand more and more than how we see the world, how we interact with the world, how we are influenced by the world. The broad scale of this holograph that we're living in is influencing in our own simple-minded little simple world of ourselves, how we're traveling, our function, our progression, our even age and health and disease-related parameters. So to me, that's an optimistic part of science. It's opening up the concept that all is not just determined. It's not just cast in stone. It is a dynamic process. We're engaged in that dynamic process. We can use that process for our own self-refinement at any age, be it young or old, to be in a constant state of self-improvement. That's a really encouraging message.
Yeah, and obviously we don't have to go into it, but the opposite of that would be fear, right? How maybe politicians can use that to influence our behavior, right?
Well, I would say it's not just politicians. I think we've, seen years of people who are experts in the manipulation of human psychology to get certain behavioral outcomes. It could be buying a product that's deleterious to our health, like sweetened beverages, or like high salt and high fat foods. Or, we've seen manipulation of human behavior through turning the psychology of of function into the advantage to a few to their whatever motives might be. So it's reteaching ourselves how to be the owners of our own body, our own trajectory, our own life story, and that's that locus of control, that self-efficacy, is really a very important part of what we call our opportunity to be healthy.
It's so true.
I was saying, Louie, that as I'd gone around to all of these different parts of the United States photographing, that basically is what informed and got me thinking about this activist art series that I have. I mean, I've been in some of the most beautiful places ever, and touring like New Mexico, from Carlsbad Caverns all the way up to Farmington, New Mexico. And all I saw along there in all of that beauty was fracking. I mean, you can just watch nature is being absolutely destroyed. And, so I put that someplace. I've been all up and down the Mississippi Delta, the Mississippi area, ending at the Mississippi Delta. And you're watching these people whose lives are destined. I mean, they might as well just give it up because they can't move. They can't, I mean, there's nothing for them to do. They just have to stay there. And it's just heart-wrenching. So I bring that back, and I bring those feelings back, and I put those people and their challenges into the work that I'm doing, because we need to know that that exists. I have people that come to the areas where I live, and they can't imagine that everything doesn't look like this all around the world. And I'm saying, no, you have to get out. You have to really see what is going on. And the degradation of the earth, the genetically modified crops and the pesticides and all of it, it's wreaking havoc on Mother Earth. And I think that we really have to come together and say, okay, regardless of how this happened, regardless of whose fault it is, we have to come together and try and find solutions, because the solutions are out there. And I think the one thing that this whole last series of 6 or 8 months that we're going into, people have begun to think maybe there are things out there that we can do, but then they don't know what to do. So we have to be able to kind of lead them along. If you want to be healthy, look at what you eat. If you're not eating healthy food, you can't be healthy. If where your food is grown is not in a healthy, regenerative, agricultural space, the food is not going to be good for you. So you have to look at all of those things, and you have to choose health. You have to choose health, and then you could also choose happiness. And I think both of those things are a choice. And Jeff and I kind of tease each other because we're exactly the same age. And, I consider myself to be a really young 74, but, I've been around a lot of years, a whole lot of years. And at the rate I'm going, I am committed to the best health that I can have for as long as I can have it. So I want to be happy, 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 dead.
Well, can I just add on to what Ruth just said? Because I think there's a lesson for all of us. And when I'm thinking back, and we all do kind of a rewind of our own tape when we hear another person speaking with authority, the conversations of importance. And I'm thinking back to when my mother gave me a small plot in the back of our house when I was growing up in Southern California back in the late 40s, early 50s. And that little plot was just this small area that was going to be my garden. And I didn't know anything about gardens at all. I was like 6 years old. I went down and we got the seeds, and I planted these little things in there. And, when I got those carrots and those turnips and those radishes to grow, and I could pull them out of the ground and I could eat them, it was quite honestly, the marriage of science and art and aesthetics all together in one huge, overwhelming learning curve. Because not only did those carrots look really cool as I watched them grow from those tiny seeds, and then I had to think about what happened to go from that seed to that carrot. They were really beautiful in that little line that was in my tiny little garden. And then I pulled them out and I took the dirt off of them and I ate them, and they were like, wow, these are really tasty. So there was a total learning experience, right, about systems and about networks and about process and about engagement, because I was the one that had to weed the garden and water the plants, and we had a relationship. And I think that that construct of how we then walk upon this earth in the short number of years that we have the privilege of living will determine actually the value of the experience that we're having. And it will add back, if I can use the immune system metaphor, to the improvement of the overall immune system of our planet and to others that we engage with. So it starts with little things, little steps. To use the concept of B.J. Fogg, the behavior scientist at Stanford, little steps create big things when they're collected together.
Yeah, I think it's so true. One of the things I learned in making fantastic fungi, which was about mushrooms and mycelium, is the fact that we shared this idea that there's this shared underground economy where nutrients are shared without greed for ecosystems to flourish. And to me, that was just a beautiful metaphor for how we can live our lives. It's a beautiful model without being preachy. And what I'm hearing in this conversation, I think, is really important, because we talk about, healthcare. We talk about how we can take care of our bodies, but we're also concerned about the greater good. We're concerned about the commons. And I believe that self-care equals world care. And maybe that's kind of the nodal point we're in right now, because here we are isolated. We need to really think about how to take care of ourselves. But we also realize that what happens in China, what happens in Europe, what happens across America affects everybody. So let's just talk about that idea, how self-care equals world care.
Yes, I think it does. But I think that for so many, self-care comes last, because most people, their lives are about putting out fires during the day. I am very, very bad at this. I always care for myself last, and I can feel myself. It's like, okay, you better step up and get going here, or you're going down. But I do think that we have the energy that when we go about using and practicing self-care, and it's different for everybody. What might be self-care for me might not work for somebody else. What I do for self-care is, I walk in nature, I do some meditation, I do my art, I'm thankful for what I have, and I don't worry about what I don't have.
I'd like to maybe be a slight contrarian to this, but hopefully it's positive in my contrarian position. I think the most important thing, quite honestly, at least for me personally, is selfless care. Because if it is selfless, it doesn't get so incestuous about my own myopia, about my everything going on in my little sphere of influence. It really relates to why I want to be the best I can for, as Ruth said earlier, those that will follow. And in my case, like hers, it's our children, grandchildren, and those in the generation that they represent. I'd like the world to be as good or better than that which I had the fortune of being born into in 46. And so my belief is that my self-care really derives out of selfless care. Because if I really want to be selfless, I need to be around and functional enough that I can do my best job of creating goodness. And through that, it seems to have a multiplicative feed-forward effect, because then other people say, well, gee whiz, it seemed like Jeff is really out for the goodness of us, but the return on investment to me is self-care, because it has a feedback process to me of advantage in the way that I would want to take care of myself, see myself in the context of the greater good.
I think that mirrors like nature's intelligence, because it's almost like an oxymoron to say I'm going to be environmentally unjust, but I'm going to be super healthy with my body. I mean, it's like an opposite. Once you're on the path of knowing these systems of, like, growing your own food, eating stuff that's healthy, doesn't have poisons or pesticides in it. If you're doing that for your body, then you want to do that for the planet as well.
Yes.
And they're actually the same.
Can I give a quick anecdote of that? So
yeah.
Ruth is aware of this because she has been so gracious to engage with me in this thing we're doing with this new company that she mentioned, Big Bold Health, which is basically involved with trying to bring back into the American culture a crop that was lost after colonial times called Himalayan tartary buckwheat. It's a very unusual crop that has a 2,500-year history as a foodstuff that was derived actually out of the Himalayan mountains, and now it has kind of been lost in our culture. Well, to make a long story short, we decided that we wanted to bring it back in the United States because it has huge nutrient value that you don't see in any other crop. It's a gluten-free, low glycemic load, source of calories with the highest level of immune-protecting nutrients that we know of in any plant food. And so we started to recultivate this by a relationship that we put together with the only person we could find in the United States that was growing at a small acreage from a former Cornell University ag professor who, and his wife, who was a nurse, retired from Cornell and started this little farm to grow this crop just in a few acres. Well, now we've kind of taken a cooperative to bring other farmers into growing this. And so this year, for the first time, we produced, in fact, I think it's the first time in the world, organically certified, regenerative agriculture produced Himalayan tartary buckwheat from these farms. And now we have 4 farmers, and we have multiple acres that we're growing of this. And for me, what happened is, because this is an artisanal crop, obviously, we're using artisanal equipment to harvest it and to process the final seeds that come off the crop. And so when we got the video of the harvest this year, and then the threshing of the crop, and then separating the seeds from the chaff, and then the whole processing, which was this using this equipment that was some of it from the 19th century, and now producing 200,000 pounds of Himalayan tartary buckwheat, it was an emotional experience for me. It wasn't just like, wow, isn't that cool? We actually did this. It was a sense that we were back in the soil. We were back in the earth. We were doing goodness. It's a regenerative crop. It's capturing carbon. We're producing goodness to people. This will have health value. It's the system. And we can all do these things. You don't all have to own a tartary buckwheat farm, but it's little ways that we contribute to this cycle that brings us goodness. It's a selfless goodness that produces self-help.
That's a great story. Wow. I can't wait to try the buckwheat.
Really cool.
I love it, actually.
Well, when I first became, plant-based diet at UCLA, it's been so easy to maintain it because, you know what? It tastes better. It's like I can't go backwards just because of the fact that, in a very selfish way, I preferred food that tastes healthy. And it appeals to the palate. We have all these taste buds that become numb because you get like overkill with like Thousand Island dressing and sugar and heavy salt. The subtlety of food is missing. The art of food is missing when you just kind of blast it with all these powerful ingredients. So I'm looking forward to that.
So can I say something quickly to you? So one of the things about this tartary buckwheat that relates directly to your story is it has a little bit of a bitter aftertaste because it's so high in these nutrients, these phytochemicals. So people might say, oh, I don't like bitter, because we kind of mark bitter out of our diets.
Yeah.
But what people don't know is that those bitter receptors that are sitting on our tongue are also found in our digestive tracts to stimulate the release of hormones called intraendocrine hormones that regulate our blood sugar and regulate our inflammation. So eating bitter produces a positive effect on our body's physiology. So when we repurpose thinking like, wow, bitter is kind of good because I'm doing something for my blood sugar, it may change the whole perception of organoleptic property of our food. So it's all a cultural context that we're starting to rewilding our taste perceptions.
Yeah. And all the stuff that's important for the microbiome, the things that are fermented foods that, a lot of people get turned off on. But when you develop that palate, I love fermented food, and the fact that I know it's good for my microbiome, and they're just dying to get a little bit of that,
Raise children organically, organic food. When you don't allow them to eat sugars and things like that, they eat everything. They love everything. It's so interesting, but the minute you introduce sugar, it's all over with. So, I heartily recommend, just like you were talking, plant a little garden. It doesn't have to be much. You can do it in a little bucket. Children love to do that. They love to be part of the earth. I think it's very, very natural for them to do that. And it teaches them how to be stewards. And I think
my granddaughter, two of my granddaughters, I have three granddaughters, but two of them decided they want to have bunnies. But when they started to look, because they're very intense about proper stewardship of their bunnies. So when they went to figure out how to feed them, they said, oh my word, the only way we can really feed these to be healthy bunnies is to make them organic products. So we have to grow organic stuff for these bunnies. So they became little mini organic farmers to produce organic feed for their bunnies. And now they have these friends that have these bunnies, these rabbits. And the friends come over and go, oh, the coats of your rabbits are so beautiful. Why are they so silky and soft and shiny? And of course, the granddaughters are saying, well, you got to know about how to make your organic food for your rabbits. It's all a part of the system. They're living in the system. So there's a million ways to teach, right, and to learn and to grow.
Yeah. I really think it's quite true. Like anybody can plant a tomato, plant in a small pot on their back porch. And besides getting the benefit of this incredible, food, the flower is food for the pollinator, which needs, to bring back food to its brood. And then, when the plant is over, it becomes compost for the soil. And you learn about the whole cycle of life that can come even just from one plant. And for young people to experience it and not think that, tomato is a shrink wrapped object that comes in your grocery store, shipped from Mexico, grown, with pesticides, trucked with carbon footprint that's enormous in order to get to your table. Because, anybody can grow a tomato. It's the easiest thing in the world.
Yes. Herbs, you can grow all kinds of things. It doesn't take a whole lot.
No.
So I think that we should all, and it tastes so much better. And if you start them young, they actually develop a palate that is pretty darn sophisticated. Mm-hmm. I know my grandson, one of his first meals, of course, my daughter breastfed him until he was in college, but then that was with kippers. I'm like, kippers? Are you kidding me? But to this day, he loves kippers. So whatever they start out with, they end up with.
And they also like, food that's colorful, and that's, again, nature's way of orchestrating our behavier to some degree. I mean,
remember Heinz was testing blue ketchup? Remember that?
No.
You don't remember that?
Blue ketchup? I don't. No.
You did? Oh my God, yes. They were testing different colors of ketchup so that the kids would like it. And they had this blue ketchup out for a while, and it didn't go very far. But yes, see, you're not that old, Louie.
I know. Well, thank you for that. I'm just a kiddo. So Ruth, in your book, there's a great quote from Margaret Mead that you wrote. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So tell me, as an artist, philanthropist, activist, tell me how committed you are to get citizens to create the change we need right now.
It's what I do. It's what my foundation does. I have a private family foundation, and its whole purpose is to be the change. I have invested my time, my money, my effort for many, many years in things that I felt could help be the change. I invest in something called discovery research, which gets no funding from the NIH. It gets no funding from usually private universities, but I have sponsored 3 studies on glyphosate. And we all know, most people are aware today that glyphosate is not a good thing, but they were not aware of what it was doing to their bodies. And Jeff just alluded to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. We're seeing that in teens, especially up and down the California, the middle of California. I'm working with a pediatrician and a scientist now who's came to us because his population is seeing so much non-alcoholic fatty liver disease in these kids. So those are the kinds of things that when you fund something like that and you can replicate it over and over again, it's really very compelling, and we need to look at that. I also fund investigative journalism because I don't think that a lot of times we don't have access to all different kinds of information and all different kinds of thoughts. So over the years, I have funded, again, a lot on herbicides and pesticides. I have funded a lot on immunity, immunizations, looking to find how can I have the biggest impact? That's always what's been the most important thing to me is, anybody can fund. And I've always known that, I can fund one organization and I can fund the heck out of it. And at the end of the day, I have funded one organization. And yes, it may be doing great things, but in order to create the kind of impact that I have had over the past 20 years, basically, I have funded in the area that is not particularly popular. And I wish more people would come with me because we always need more funds for these things.
It's quite true. So one last question. I know as we're closing in on our time, this is a question from Mary Rachel from Florida. What's the most important thing you've learned about yourselves and others during the pandemic?
Well, I will tell you, I have learned that I need people. I need people around me. I need community. I need to engage one-on-one with you. I need to be able to look in your face. And we don't have that now. And I think that's the hardest thing for me. I've always been such a people person, and I kind of read people, and we don't have the ability to do that so much now. So I feel this disconnectivity that's going on. And I don't want that to become the norm for us, because I think if we give that up, I think we're giving up a great part of ourselves. And I don't want that to be our new normal.
Jeff?
Yeah, I think Ruth, that was really beautifully said. I would say for me, there's many things that I've learned through this remarkable, unprecedented experience in my life and all of our lives. But the thing that probably I would aggregate together as the principle is, I've learned that we cannot live effectively out of fear. If we live out of fear, we are withering. We're committing hara-kiri, suicide, whatever dramatic word you want to use. We have to find ways to mobilize a sense that fear has to be put back in the backyard, and the front yard is where we're going, that we're proceeding forward. And this is sometimes very hard to do in the face of what really are unexpected things that we have no experience how to manage and how to cope with and how to get over. And we all have these extraordinary kind of horrible thoughts of people dying on respirators in hospitals without seeing their loved ones. And I mean, it's the most ghastly thought to even contemplate. But on the face of that, I think we have to find ways to say with each moment that we have the privilege of being here, because it is a gift to be here. You know, I think of what's the probability of my body and my mind, heart, and soul developing spontaneously in the universe by the collection of matter just from stardust. I mean, the density of matter in the universe is 1 atom per cubic meter. The probability it's all going to coalesce spontaneously to make me and give me this opportunity is so on small probability. On a statistical mechanical basis, I don't exist. You couldn't even calculate what the probability would be. But I do exist against all other forces that would say the opposite. And so that's a privilege. And I need to fight off all that other fear. The fear that I'm not good enough, the fear that I can't make it, the fear that I might get sick, the fear, I mean, just layered on. And we need to strip that away. And that's what I've learned through COVID-19. So our family, you know, we do now our Zoom calls because we can't all get together. And it's all about imparting a spirit of enlightenment, a spirit of opportunity, a spirit of, we have the privilege, we have the opportunity to do something tomorrow that might make the world a little bit better. And that fighting back against the darkness of fear gives purpose. And that is really a direction to health. So that's what I've learned.
Yeah, I think studies have shown that people that have purpose live longer, you know,
yeah.
According to research I saw at UC Berkeley's Greater Good Science Center. So if we want to even be selfish and live longer, then having purpose and working for the greater good makes sense. I think for myself, during this pandemic, I've gotten, I guess, just a deeper sense of gratitude. You know, I was always grateful for the little things like the bees and the plants, but now I'm just grateful for the opportunity, as Ruth said, to connect with somebody, you know, to be able to see my children. And then with the fires, all of a sudden now I'm grateful for blue sky. Another
yeah.
You know, and so it's been, I think, a good wake-up call during this period, and hopefully, you know, this idea of a reboot, and as we move forward, we don't want to go back to the old normal. This could be an opportunity where everything was put on pause, and let's just evaluate how to live more sustainably and how to live in harmony with nature, you know, because that is the way out. It's the only way out. And I think the work that both you are doing is, you know, a pathway to that brighter future. So I'm very grateful for both of you for being the edge runners that you are. Thank you so much. Thank you.
We feel the same of you. It's a community.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And speaking of community, I also want to be able to thank our sponsors for today's podcast, the Fetzer Institute, and how they're building a spiritual foundation for a loving world. And also for my team of Leland and Annie and Courtney and Sarah from Moving Art, and Bethany, Ron, and Jason from Magical Threads. We wouldn't be able to do this podcast without the support of so many talented, creative, and technical people. So I appreciate all of you. It's great to be in this like divine space between wonder and awe. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Peace.
Peace.